I will never forget the morning my daughter, my only daughter, told me she was getting married without me. She said it with a coldness I didn't recognize, with the same voice that once asked for my help buttoning her school dress, now trembling only with pride and contempt. "I don't need some washed-up old woman walking me down the aisle," she said, without even blinking, as she picked up her purse. That sentence pierced me like a slow-moving bullet. I felt each word weigh more than all the years I'd lived alone, more than all the nights I'd spent looking at her picture, hoping that one day she would call me Mom with love again. I said nothing. I couldn't, because if I had opened my mouth, the pain would have come out as screams, and I didn't want her to remember me as a woman begging for love. She closed the door, and the echo of it slamming reverberated through the empty walls of my house as if it were sealing my fate. In the silence that followed, I heard the ticking of the dining room clock, the same one I bought for her sweet 16. That clock had marked every minute of her childhood, her teenage years, of all the times I waited up until she came home from parties. Now, it only marked my defeat. I lit a cigarette, even though I hardly smoke anymore, and just stared out the window. The sky was such a deep gray it seemed to understand my mood. I thought about my late husband, David, and I wondered if, from wherever he was, he could see what had become of our daughter. "David, if only you could see what your little girl has turned into," I murmured. And then I felt something inside me finally break for good. But before I continue, I would like to know if you have subscribed to the channel and if you liked the video. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories on William's Revenge Stories. Now, let's continue. We weren't always like this. There was a time when Emily was my reason for getting up every morning. I remember when she was just 6 years old, she would climb on my shoulders to reach the apples on the tree in the backyard. She called me my hero, and her laughter was the music that filled our home. Later, when David got sick, she was the one who helped me take care of him. She used to tell me that when she grew up, she would marry someone just like him. But time, hardship, and the words of other people slowly pushed her away. It all started when she met Michael, an elegant young man with an easy smile and an ambitious glint in his eye. She met him at work, and from that moment on, my daughter began to change. She no longer came over for Sunday BBQ. She didn't call me at night to tell me about her day. And when I did see her, she was always in a hurry, as if she were ashamed to be seen with me. I remember one afternoon I went to visit her without calling first. She opened the door and tensed up the moment she saw me. "Mom, you didn't tell me you were coming," she said nervously, as Michael appeared behind her with a polite but distant smile. "I just wanted to say hello, honey." Michael extended his hand, but there was something in his gesture, something that sent a chill down my spine, a mixture of superiority and pity. "A pleasure, Mrs. Johnson. Emily has told me so much about you," he said, but it didn't sound like a compliment. In that moment, I understood that this man didn't see me as the mother of the woman he loved, but as an insignificant obstacle. That was the first time I felt like I was losing everything. Little by little, Emily started speaking to me with impatience, as if my every word was an annoyance. When I asked her if she was sure about getting married, she took offense. "Mom, you don't understand anything. Michael makes me feel important. With you, it was always sadness, sickness, and bills. I want a new life." I didn't answer her. I looked at her and saw something in her eyes I didn't recognize. Shame. Shame for me. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed at the table, looking at a photo of us at the park, taken when she was 10. I was holding her in my arms, and we were both laughing. How can you go from love to humiliation so quickly? I thought about writing her a letter, but my hands were shaking with rage. I didn't know if I wanted to apologize or make her understand how much her words had hurt me. The next day, I found out from a neighbor that the wedding was on Saturday. "They say it's going to be at St. Michael's Parish, with over 200 guests," she commented, not knowing what that meant to me. I stayed quiet, but inside, something ignited, a mix of sadness and dignity I had never felt before. If my daughter wanted to erase my existence, she should at least do it knowing who I was, not the washed-up old woman she spoke of, but the woman who raised her with love, who defended her from everyone, even from herself. That night, I sat down at my desk, took out an envelope and a pen, and wrote on the front, "For the priest officiating the wedding of Emily Johnson." I still didn't know what I would put inside, but I knew one thing. I was not going to let the story end like this, with my name erased from her life. I lit a candle, just like I used to when my husband was still alive, and I asked him to guide me. David always used to say that true love doesn't give up, but also that a mother must not stay silent in the face of injustice. And though I didn't yet know what truth I would reveal, I felt that life was pushing me to do it. That morning, as the clock struck 3, I began to write. It wasn't a letter of resentment, but of justice. A letter she would never forget. A letter that would be read at the very moment she said, "I do." And with that certainty, I blew out the candle and smiled for the first time in a long, long time. We weren't always enemies. There was a time when Emily was the reason I felt invincible. I remember when she was born, I was barely 30 years old with a heart full of dreams. David, my husband, cried when he saw her for the first time, and we swore that she would never want for anything. We were poor, yes, but we were happy. I worked at a small diner, and every night I'd come home with my hands raw and my soul filled with pride because I knew I was doing it for them. Emily was a curious, restless child with an intelligence that amazed me. She loved watching me cook. Sometimes she would sit on my lap and say, "Mom, how do you make a bunch of ingredients turn into something so yummy?" With patience, I would always reply, "Food is a lot like people. If you treat it with love, it reveals its best side." She would laugh, and every time she did, I felt the world stop for a moment. When she turned 8, I bought her a small dollhouse. It was simple, but I painted it in the colors she chose: pink, white, and sky blue. She spent hours in there, making up stories, and every afternoon she would run out to hug me when she saw me coming home. My mom, the best cook in the world. She would shout for the whole neighborhood to hear. And I, a woman of few words, felt like the queen of the universe. But fate does not grant eternal happiness. David got sick when Emily was 12. First it was fainting spells, then diagnoses, medications, hospitals. I sold the few valuable things we had to pay for treatments. And all the while, my daughter watched as the strongest man in her life slowly faded away. Sometimes, I would find her crying silently, hiding behind a door. "Don't cry, my love," I'd tell her. "Your dad is going to get through this." But she didn't believe it, and neither did I. David died one August morning as the sun streamed through the hospital window. Emily was 13. The scream she let out still haunts me at night. After that day, nothing was ever the same. Suddenly the house became cold, silent. The smell of the Sunday BBQ David used to make was gone, and so was my daughter's laughter. I tried to be a mother and a father at the same time, but I failed many times. I didn't know how to talk to her about certain things, how to comfort her when I saw her looking at pictures of her dad. There were days she would lock herself in her room and refuse to eat, and others when she would just look at me with a mixture of anger and sadness. I think, deep down, she blamed me for not being able to save him. When she turned 16, she started working part-time at a clothing store. She said she wanted to help me, but I knew she was doing it to escape the emptiness. That's where she started to meet other people, get other ideas, and slowly, I stopped being her refuge. I remember an argument that marked the beginning of the end. "Mom, I don't want you to keep working so hard, you're getting old." "I'm not old, just tired, but someone has to keep this house going. I don't want to live like this," she said. "I want something more, something different." "And what's different, honey?" "I don't know, but I don't want to end up like you." That sentence hurt more than any physical wound. "I don't want to end up like you." From that day on, something between us broke, even though neither of us said it out loud. Still, I tried to be present. I helped her get into college, paid what I could, sold what was left of our savings. She told me it was temporary, that when she graduated, she would pay me back everything, but the money was never what was important. I just didn't want her to forget where she came from. Over time, she started making friends I didn't know. She dressed differently, talked differently, and corrected me when I said something old-fashioned. One afternoon, while we were having lunch, she told me she had met someone. "His name is Michael. He's smart, works at an important company." I smiled at her, though something inside me felt uneasy. "And does he treat you well?" I asked. "Yes, Mom. He makes me feel special." Her voice trembled a little, and I understood she was in love. From that moment on, her world revolved around him. Michael started visiting her at the house, always polite, always with measured words. But there was something in his eyes I didn't like. It wasn't love I saw, but calculation. One night, when he went to the bathroom, I saw he left his phone on the table. A message notification popped up. "Don't forget what we talked about. Everything will go as planned." I didn't know what it meant, but something inside me warned me that this man was not bringing peace. I tried to talk to Emily, but she shut me down. "Mom, stay out of it. Michael loves me and you're just jealous." "It's not jealousy, honey, it's concern. You always find something to criticize. Just let me live my life." And so I did. I let her live her life. But in doing so, I died a little each day. The years passed, and the love that once filled the house turned into distance. She only came for Christmas, and sometimes not even then. One day, while cleaning the house, I found the old dollhouse I had bought her. It was broken, covered in dust. I picked it up carefully, and one of the walls came off, revealing a photo of us, her on my shoulders, laughing. I looked at it for minutes, and then I felt a pang in my chest. I remembered her recent words. "I don't need some washed-up old woman," and I understood that a mother's love can become her greatest punishment. That night, I took out the envelope again. For the priest officiating the wedding of Emily Johnson, I thought about everything I had kept silent about for years, about the secrets David took to his grave, about the things I discovered after his death, and I understood that the time had come to speak. I wouldn't do it out of resentment, but out of justice. Sometimes the truth saves us, but it also sets us free. And I, after a lifetime of silence, needed to be set free. The first time I saw him, I knew that man would bring misfortune. It wasn't because of what he said, but what he didn't. It was that way he looked at everyone as if he were assessing their worth. Michael was young, handsome, with a suit that was too expensive for his age, and a cologne that filled the room. Emily introduced him with a smile I hadn't seen on her since she was a little girl. "Mom, this is Michael," she said, and she said it with pride. He shook my hand firmly, too firmly, like someone marking their territory. "A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Johnson. Emily has told me a lot about you." "I hope it was good," I replied. He smiled but didn't answer. That smile left a bitter taste in my mouth. I didn't know then if it was my distrust or a mother's intuition that made me look at him that way, but something in me screamed that this young man was not sincere. During dinner, he talked about his job, his travels, the connections he had. Everything was about luxury, success, goals, and more goals. Emily looked at him, fascinated, as if his every word was a promise of a future I could never give her. "And you, Mrs. Johnson, what do you do for a living?" he asked me in a friendly tone, although his eyes held a curiosity disguised as compassion. "I owned a small diner," I answered calmly. "Retired now?" "Ah, a noble profession," he said, looking down at his manicured nails, "though it must be hard on the hands." I looked at mine, full of scars, of years, of effort. I hid them under the table. Emily laughed with no apparent malice, but with a nuance that hurt more than any word. I knew in that moment I was losing something more than her affection. After that night, Michael became a regular presence in our lives. He would come on Sundays, always with some expensive gift: flowers, perfumes, boxes of chocolates. I watched as my daughter transformed. She stopped wearing the simple clothes she loved and started dressing the way he wanted. "It's just style, Mom," she would tell me. But it wasn't just that. It was as if she were slowly erasing herself to fit into his world. One afternoon, he asked me to go with them to see the land where they planned to build their house. I accepted, though I didn't understand why he wanted my opinion. The place was beautiful, with a view of the hills, but what struck me was how Michael talked about the future without ever including me. "Emily and I will travel a lot. Our children will go to good schools. We will have a different life." I just listened. I couldn't see myself in that life. There was no place for me there. When we got back, while Emily went to get something, Michael offered me a cigarette. "You know, Linda," he said in a casual tone, "Emily told me about the tough times you all went through." "Yes. Life wasn't always easy," I replied. "That's exactly why I want to give her a better life," he added. "You've done your part. Now let me take care of her." He said it with a calm smile, but every word sounded like an order. I understood that he wasn't asking for my permission. He was displacing me. I couldn't sleep that night. I looked at the old family photos and felt time slipping through my fingers. I thought about David, how he used to tell me that when the time came, I should trust in life and let Emily follow her own path. But what happens when that path leads her straight to someone who doesn't deserve her love? Months passed and my daughter got engaged. She told me over the phone, without emotion. "Mom, Michael asked me to marry him." "And what did you say?" I asked, though I already knew. I said yes. There was an awkward silence. "And when's the wedding?" "We don't know yet. Michael wants something big, elegant. Don't worry. I'll let you know." "I'll let you know. Not I'll invite you. Not I want you to be with me. Just I'll let you know." One day, out of curiosity or maybe desperation, I decided to find out more about Michael. I went to the diner where I still had friends, people who worked in the local service industry. One of them told me he had seen Michael several times at a downtown restaurant, but not with my daughter. He showed me a picture he'd taken with his phone. In it, Michael was sitting with an older, elegant woman who was not Emily. "Maybe she's a client," I said, trying to convince myself. "It didn't look like that," the man replied. "They kissed before they left." I felt a pit in my stomach. I put the photo in my pocket and left without another word. That night, I waited for Emily to come over. When she arrived, I showed her the picture. "Who is this woman, honey?" Emily turned pale. "Mom, don't start. That woman is a friend of Michael's. A friend, or something more. I don't know, and I don't care." "Of course you care!" I yelled for the first time. "Can't you see who you're marrying?" She looked at me with fury. "You always want to ruin my happiness. Always. I just want to protect you. I don't need your protection. I don't need anything from you." And she left, slamming the door. I was alone again, with the photo in my hand. That woman, there was something about her. Her face was unsettlingly familiar. It took me hours to remember, but when I did, the air left my body. It was the same woman I had seen years ago in an old photo of my husband, David, a co-worker, he had said back then. But now I understood the truth. I searched through David's old things. In a drawer, I found letters, photographs, memories, and there it was. A love letter signed by someone with the same last name as Michael. I didn't want to believe it, but the name matched. Peterson. Michael wasn't just engaged to my daughter. He was the son of the woman my husband had cheated on me with. I stood there, in shock, as everything clicked into place. Life, in its cruel irony, was bringing me back to the exact point where my misery began. My daughter was going to marry the son of my husband's mistress. I cried that night, not for myself, but for her, because she had no idea of the history she was repeating, and I understood that if I didn't do something, the cycle would continue. I took the envelope I had prepared for the priest and left it on the table. It was still empty, but I now knew what I had to write. The truth, the whole truth. And this time, I wasn't going to be silent. The day before the wedding dawned strangely. There was no wind, no birds singing, no neighborhood dogs barking. Everything seemed suspended, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something. I woke up before dawn. I hadn't slept all night. The candle I had lit the evening before had burned all the way down, leaving a line of dried wax on the desk. On the table rested the white envelope with my steady handwriting, for the priest officiating the wedding of Emily Johnson. There was still nothing inside, but in my head, the letter had been written for years, even if I didn't know it. I made coffee and sat by the window. The neighborhood was slowly waking up. I saw neighbors sweeping their porches, kids with colorful backpacks running to school, the paperboy riding his bike. Everything was the same, except for me. I felt that this day would mark the end of something, maybe my pain, or maybe my entire life as a mother. Mid-morning, Emily called. She hadn't called in weeks. "Mom," she said in a dry voice, "I'm just letting you know the wedding is tomorrow. I don't want any trouble. Don't come." I remained silent for a few seconds before answering. "Don't worry, honey. I'm not planning on interrupting anything. I'm glad to hear it. I just wanted to wish you happiness." "I will be," she replied with a confidence that hurt. "Michael loves me." I wanted to say so many things, but I said nothing. When she hung up, the silence was so thick I had to take a deep breath to keep from crying. Life had taught me that love isn't shown with sweet words, but with actions, and mine, though she wouldn't understand it, would be the most difficult act of all. In the afternoon, I went for a walk. I passed by the church where she was getting married. The preparations were underway. White flowers, gold ribbons, musicians tuning their instruments. I saw Michael walk in, talking to the priest, and I had to step back so he wouldn't see me. He was laughing, self-assured. He looked like a happy man, but behind that smile was a shadow that only I recognized. I remembered when I found the old letter among David's things. The words were still engraved in my mind. "Our thing can't continue, my wife suspects." take care of your son. Promise me he won't repeat my mistakes. Signed with a P. And now, that son, Michael, was about to marry the daughter of the woman whose husband had betrayed her. An irony so cruel that only life itself could write it. I returned home and opened the drawer where I kept the old photos. I took out one of David, smiling, holding baby Emily. "Look what we did, David," I whispered. "We raised her with love, and still the world has corrupted her." I felt anger, but also compassion. Not for Michael, not for his mother, but for my daughter. She was innocent in the middle of a story she never asked to inherit. I lit another candle. The smoke rose in a spiral, as if trying to carry my thoughts to a place where there is no blame. I took the pen and began to write. "Father, I beg you to read this before continuing with the ceremony. This is not about ruining a wedding, but about preventing a greater tragedy. My name is Linda Johnson, mother of the bride, and although I was not invited, I cannot remain silent. What is about to be joined at this altar is not a blessed marriage, but the echo of an old sin repeating itself. The man my daughter is about to marry is the son of the one who destroyed my home, the son of my late husband's mistress. It is not the fault of the young people, but of the silence of their elders, but the truth must be spoken, because love cannot be built on a lie." My hands trembled as I wrote. Each word felt like a brick on my chest. I felt that with this letter, I was sealing my fate. I didn't know how Emily would react, but at least, when the priest read it, she would know who her mother was, and above all, she would know who she really was. I finished the letter as night fell. I folded it carefully, put it in the envelope, and sealed it with a drop of melted wax. I looked at it for a long time before putting it in my pocket. It wasn't revenge, it was a farewell. I walked to the church when no one was left. The altar lights illuminated the interior with a deceptive peace. I entered silently and approached the confessional. The priest, an older man with a kind face, recognized me. "Linda, what brings you here?" "Father, I need to ask you a favor." I handed him the envelope. "Tomorrow, during the ceremony, when it's time for the vows, read this. Please." He looked at me with surprise. "Are you sure?" "More than ever." "What does this letter contain?" "The truth. You know, Father, the truth is the only gift that can save a soul." The priest nodded slowly. "If you believe it is just, then I will do it." I thanked him. I left, and as I closed the door, I felt something inside me release. I couldn't eat dinner that night. I just stared at the portrait of David on the mantel. "Tomorrow it will all be over," I told him, not with hatred, but with justice. And although my heart ached, for the first time in years, I felt peace. I went to bed late, with the feeling of having already lived a full lifetime. As sleep overcame me, I imagined Emily in a white dress, smiling, walking towards the altar, unsuspecting of what she was about to hear. I didn't know if she would hate me or understand me one day. But one thing was certain. After tomorrow, nothing would be the same. As the candle went out, the last thought that crossed my mind was a prayer. God, do not let this truth destroy her, but do not let her live in a lie either. And with that, I closed my eyes, knowing that the next dawn would bring the most painful and necessary day of my life. I wrote that letter with a trembling hand, but with a firm heart. Every word was a wound opening and a scar closing at the same time. I had to say everything, even if it hurt me, because silence, that old enemy that had accompanied me for so many years, could no longer rule my life. I placed it on the table, turned on the lamp, and took a deep breath. The paper was blank, waiting for me like a postponed confession. I took the pen, and the first thing I wrote was her name, Emily, my daughter. If you are hearing this, it is because I no longer have the strength to remain silent. I am not writing from a place of resentment, but from the deepest love a mother can feel, a love that has been misunderstood, despised, and yet is still alive. I paused for a moment, a lump forming in my throat. For a second, I thought about tearing up the paper, about letting time bury the truth, but something inside me, maybe David's voice, maybe my own, forced me to continue. I want to tell you something your father could never tell you. When you were just 4 years old, his illness had already weakened him, but before he got sick, before life stole our peace, he made a mistake that destroyed me, but that I decided to forgive for the love of you. He fell in love with another woman, with someone who promised to help him with a business venture, but what she did was take advantage of his vulnerability. That woman was named Catherine Peterson, and today, the man you are about to marry is her son. The tears blurred my vision. Remembering that name was like reliving my husband's death a second time. I continued writing, determined that nothing would remain in the shadows. I am not telling you this so you will hate, but so you will understand. Sometimes, fate has cruel ways of showing us what we refuse to see. Michael, your fiancé, doesn't know who I really am, nor what his mother did, but his family knows, and I have seen in that young man's eyes the same ambition I saw in his mother when she took what I loved most. Don't marry him, my daughter. Do not repeat your father's story. I got up and walked to the window. The night was serene, windless. The reflection of the candle on the glass looked like a living flame that reminded me I was still breathing. I took a sip of cold coffee and went on. I made mistakes too, Emily. I was a woman too proud to ask for help when I needed it, too quiet to show you my feelings. When your father died, I dedicated myself to surviving, not to living. And that was my greatest sin with you, to have raised you with love but without tenderness. I didn't know how to show you how much I needed you. That's why when you turned your back on me, I didn't blame you. It only hurt me that the love I gave you wasn't enough to protect you. As I wrote, I felt a sense of release. Each word was a confession before God and my own conscience. The paper was filling up with my entire life, with the silences, the regrets, everything I had kept quiet while time stole my loved ones from me. Do not think that I want to ruin your wedding. The only thing I desire is for you to live in truth, even if it hurts. Because love born from deception does not flourish, it only withers. And if today you allow this marriage to happen, you will be joining your destiny with the shadow of the woman who destroyed ours. Don't allow it, my daughter. Not because I say so, but because you deserve to be free from the mistakes of others. I stared at those lines for a long time. Tears fell onto the paper, and the ink stains looked like open wounds. I thought of David, in his last days, when he took my hand and whispered, "Take care of our daughter, Linda. Don't judge her. Just protect her." And that's what I was doing, in a way she might not understand now, but that one day she would. If, when you read this, I am no longer here, I want you to remember something. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, but not letting the past steal your peace. I forgave your father even though it hurt me. And I forgive you too, for the words you said to me, because I know you didn't say them from the heart, but from the pain of not knowing who you really are. Everything I did for love. The clock struck 3 in the morning. I closed my eyes and listened to the sounds of the night, the crickets, the wind in the trees, the distant murmur of the city, and in the midst of it all, the silence that only accompanies those who are about to lose everything or gain everything. When the priest reads this letter, it will be too late to stop the words, but perhaps not too late to stop fate. If you hate me after this, I will accept it. I prefer your hatred born from truth to your love based on a lie. Because love built on a lie, my daughter, is condemned to crumble. I put the pen down on the table, took a deep breath, and reread everything, from beginning to end. It was a mix of a last will and a farewell, of a plea and a redemption. There was no beauty in those lines, but there was truth, and the truth, however painful, is always an act of love. I folded the paper carefully, put it inside the envelope, and sealed it. On top, I wrote, "To be read before the vows." I blew out the candle. The smoke rose in a spiral, like a freed soul. For the first time in many years, I felt peace. I didn't know if I would live to see the consequences of that letter, but I was sure of one thing. My voice would be present at the most important moment of her life, and even though she didn't know it yet, that would be the last gift her mother would ever give her. I had never felt so cold on such a sunny day. The sky was clear. The air smelled of fresh flowers and incense, and yet, inside me, it was all winter. I arrived early, long before the wedding began. Not to go inside, but to watch from a distance. I sat on a bench in the park across from St. Michael's Parish, the same church where we baptized Emily more than 30 years ago. The ironies of life. In the same place where I first held her in my arms, I was now going to watch her leave forever. The facade was decorated with white and gold garlands. Cars arrived one after another, dropping off women in elegant dresses and men in dark suits. The murmur of the crowd floated in the air like a river of voices that pushed me toward painful memories. I was not part of that crowd, nor did I want to be. I just watched, invisible. I saw Michael arrive. He wore an impeccable black suit, a pearl gray tie, and that confident smile that always repulsed me. He greeted everyone with the false cordiality of someone who knows how to feign affection. The photographer's cameras captured every gesture, every look. I watched him from my bench with my fists clenched. I thought of his mother, of the damage she caused, of the nights my husband cried because of that woman. Now, her son was walking to the altar with the same arrogance. It was like seeing the past reincarnated. Minutes later, she arrived, my daughter, Emily, dressed in white, with a veil covering her face and flowers in her hair. She looked beautiful, yes, but her beauty hurt me, because behind that smile was a lie, a story she didn't yet know, and that was about to destroy her. My heart pounded. For a moment I wanted to run, to scream at her, to hug her and say, "Don't do it, honey. Not with that man, not with that history," but I didn't. I stayed still. I knew it was no longer my place to speak. When the bells began to ring, I knew the moment had come. The guests entered one by one, the choir began to sing, and the church doors closed. I remained outside, watching through the stained glass windows, the same windows I had cleaned so many times when I helped Father Michael in my younger years. The light passing through the glass painted the floor in shades of red and blue, as if the church itself were bleeding. The minutes passed. The ceremony began. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw the movements, the gestures, the faces. Emily walked towards the altar, on the arm of an uncle who, I suppose, accompanied her in my absence. Michael waited for her with a wide smile, confident, proud, as if the whole world were his. When they met, they held hands, and in that instant, the priest, the same one I had given my letter to the night before, looked up. I could see a slight tremor on his face, a doubt he didn't hide well. He pulled something out from under the missal. It was the white envelope, my envelope. My heart pounded against my chest. I knew he was going to do it, that he would keep his word. Before we continue with the vows, the priest said in a solemn voice that could be heard even from outside, "I must read something that the mother of the bride has left for this moment." A murmur spread through the church. I saw Emily turn her head, confused. Michael frowned. The priest broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The echo of his words resonated against the stone walls like a sentence. I couldn't hear word for word, but I saw the reactions. First, surprise, then disbelief, and then fear. Emily brought her hands to her chest. Michael turned pale. People began to whisper. The priest continued reading, without stopping, as if each phrase were an arrow shot from the heavens. The flowers trembled with the wind that seeped through the open windows. I clung to the back of the bench, trying to hold back tears, and then I heard it, her broken voice. "No, it can't be," she said, taking a step back. I saw Michael let go of her hand. The silence inside the church became so thick that even the candles seemed to go out. The priest lowered the letter, his face full of compassion. Emily fell to her knees before the altar, covering her face with her hands. The white veil slipped to the floor, and her sobs filled the entire sanctuary. Michael tried to approach her, but she pushed him away. "Is it true?" she screamed at him. "Tell me it's not true." He didn't answer. He just looked at her, unable to pretend. The truth had been spoken, and there was no going back. From outside, I closed my eyes. There was no joy in my victory, only a deep pain, because even though I knew I had done the right thing, seeing her destroyed was like dying all over again. When people started to leave, I hid behind a tree. Some spoke in low voices, others looked at the ground. "What a disgrace, poor girl. How could something like this happen?" they said. The wedding had turned into a public trial, and I, her mother, was the silent judge of her destiny. I saw Michael leave, pale, his face contorted. He got into his car without looking back. Then she came out, my daughter, without a veil, without flowers, without a smile, only with red eyes and trembling hands. She stopped for a few seconds at the door, looking up at the sky, and I could have sworn that for an instant our eyes met. I don't know if she saw me or if I imagined it, but in that brief glance, I understood that she knew. She knew it had been me. I didn't move. I didn't call her. There was nothing to say, because the truth had already said it all. I waited for everyone to leave. I entered the empty church, where the fallen flowers and disordered pews were witnesses to the disaster. At the altar, the priest still held the letter. I approached him. He looked at me in silence and nodded. Sometimes the truth comes like a storm, he said, but after it, the earth can breathe again. I didn't answer. I just looked at the cross. At that moment, I felt neither pride nor remorse. Only exhaustion, the exhaustion of a woman who gave everything for love and who lost everything for telling the truth. I left the church, walking slowly, with the sun at my back. And as I walked away, I felt that, for the first time in many years, the weight I carried on my shoulders was beginning to disappear. The silence inside the church was so profound you could hear the crackle of the melting candles. The priest, with trembling hands, held my letter. His serene but heavy voice began to read. I, from the half-open door, watched with my soul in suspense. Every word that came from his mouth was an open wound in my daughter's heart, and in mine too. My daughter, if these words are being read, it is because I can no longer be silent. Silence, though it may seem like kindness, can also be a form of betrayal. And to remain silent about what is about to be repeated would be to condemn you to live a lie you do not deserve. The murmur of the crowd died down. No one breathed. Emily looked at him, confused, unable to understand. Michael pressed his lips together, crossed his arms and feigned indifference, but his leg was shaking. My name is Linda Johnson. I am the mother of the bride, although my daughter has decided that title no longer belongs to me. But a mother remains a mother, even when she is rejected. That is why I write this letter, not to prevent a wedding, but to save a soul. The priest paused. His eyes searched for Emily. She was already beginning to cry, her hands clenched in her lap. Emily, the man you are about to marry carries a last name that marked the ruin of our family, Peterson. His mother, Catherine Peterson, was your father's mistress. I found out years later, when it was too late to save our marriage and to save ourselves. I didn't seek her out. I didn't confront her, because I chose to protect you instead. But today, seeing her son about to join his life with yours, I know that silence is no longer an act of love, but of cowardice. A choked cry escaped my daughter's lips. No, it can't be, she whispered. The groom tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. The priest continued reading in a grave, firm voice, like one fulfilling a sacred duty. Destiny is sometimes cruel. It confronts us with the sins of our parents, with the shadows we thought were buried. But you, my daughter, can still choose. You are not condemned to repeat your father's story. Do not join yourself to one who carries in his blood the same deceit that destroyed our home. The women in the audience covered their mouths. Some men muttered under their breath. The groom, red with anger, stood up from his seat. "This is a fabrication," he shouted. "A farce." The priest looked at him calmly. "Young man, I ask for your respect. Let me finish." From outside, I could see Michael trembling. His face no longer showed confidence, but fear. The fear of someone who knows the truth has caught up with them. Your father wasn't a bad man, Emily. He was just weak. And that woman, the mother of your fiancé, took advantage of that weakness. I tell you this not to judge, but so you understand that there are wounds that cross generations. If you get married today without knowing this, you will be tying your destiny to the same root that poisoned ours. Emily covered her face. Her weeping filled the church. The musicians stopped playing. The flowers on the altar seemed to wilt under the weight of that truth. My daughter, I have failed too. I didn't know how to be a woman of sweet words. I took refuge in work, in sadness, in loneliness. But I never stopped loving you. That's why, even though these words hurt you, they are my last act of love. I would rather you hate me for telling you the truth than love me while living a lie. The priest's voice broke for a moment. Some guests began to stand up. The murmuring grew, like a wave crashing through the air. Emily tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The veil, fallen to the floor, mixed with the tears dripping onto the marble. Love, my daughter, is not shown with promises under an altar, but with the truth one is willing to face. And the truth is this: Michael does not love you for who you are, but for what you represent. He sees you as a way to clean a family name, to redeem a history. Do not give him that power. Do not give your life to one who carries the poison of ambition in his blood. Michael advanced towards the priest. Enough! Don't read any more, he shouted, but Father Michael raised a hand and stopped him. This church is a house of truth. Lies have no place here. I, from the doorway, felt a tremor run through me. Every word was a blow that also struck me. I had loved David, and although I had forgiven him, I never forgot his betrayal. Now, the echo of that past was returning to close the circle. Emily, if after hearing this you still decide to go forward, I will accept it. But if you choose to stop, I will know that you have learned what I tried to teach you all your life. That dignity is worth more than any altar. I love you, my daughter. Your mother, Linda Johnson. The priest closed the letter. The silence was absolute. No one moved. Until Michael, his face contorted, looked at her and said aloud, "It's true, Emily. Your mother is telling the truth." She stared at him, through her tears, and seeing that he didn't deny it, she fell to her knees. The bouquet slipped from her hands. The sound of it hitting the floor was the final note of the ceremony. I couldn't hold back any longer. I took a step back, left the church, and leaned against the wall. The tears burned my eyes. It wasn't joy, nor relief. It was sadness, pure and profound, because even though I had told the truth, that truth had cost me my soul. As I walked away, I heard my daughter's sobs behind me. I didn't look back. I had done what I had to do. The afternoon wind blew through the trees, carrying with it the echo of the words that had just changed everything, and deep down, I felt that David, from wherever he was, had heard it too. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It was peace. Painful, yes, but peace at last. The sound of the bouquet hitting the floor was the last echo of what was once a dream. The entire church was paralyzed. Emily was on her knees, her white dress spread around her like a torn shroud. The priest had left the letter on the altar, and the guests were whispering, their whispers turning into knives. What a disgrace! How can this be true? That poor girl! I, from the entrance, heard them all, and every word hurt as if it were piercing my chest. Michael took a step back. He was no longer the elegant, confident man who had walked through the main doors. Now he looked like a ghost, his face pale and his hands trembling. Emily looked at him, uncomprehending, waiting for him to say something, anything to deny what she had just heard. But Michael just remained silent, until, in an empty voice, he uttered the words that finished destroying her. I had no idea. But if that's true, this can't go on. She shot up, distraught, searching his eyes. "What are you saying? Tell me you're not going to leave me like this." He didn't answer. He just adjusted his jacket, looked at the guests, and walked towards the door. He didn't even turn to look at her. He left her alone, at the altar, in front of everyone. The murmur turned into an uproar. Some women began to stand. The musicians lowered their instruments. The priest closed his eyes and sighed. Emily, on the other hand, just stood there, staring at the door through which the man she loved had just left, and suddenly her body trembled. The tears she had been holding back erupted with a moan that chilled my soul. She fell to her knees again, but this time not to pray. She fell because she could no longer stand. I took a step forward, not knowing if I should or not. A part of me wanted to run to her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be all right. Another part, the one that had suffered years of silence, told me it wasn't my moment. But when I saw her there, alone, fragile, broken, I understood that no amount of pride is worth more than a mother's love. I walked in. At first, nobody noticed me. People were too busy watching the disaster that had just unfolded. I walked slowly down the center aisle. Each step echoed like a drum in my chest. Some people started to notice. The murmurs died down. When I reached the altar, Emily lifted her head. Her eyes widened. "Mom," she whispered. Her voice was barely a thread of air. I knelt in front of her, slowly, to be at her level. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. In her eyes, there was pain, confusion, and a guilt that made her tremble. In mine, there was exhaustion, but also compassion. "Why did you do it?" she finally asked, with a sob. "Why did you do this to me?" I took a deep breath. "Because I would rather you hate the truth than live in a lie, my daughter. But you took everything from me," she screamed. "My wedding, my happiness. That wasn't happiness, Emily. It was a wound repeating itself." She shook her head, crying. "No, you don't know. I loved him, and he wasn't who you thought he was. And you are," she shot back with rage. "Are you who I thought you were?" Her words cut through me. I didn't answer. I just looked at her and said in a low voice, "I'm the same woman who held you on her shoulders when you were 5, and you said I was your hero. I'm the same one who worked day and night so you would never lack for anything. the same one who cried alone when you called me a failure, and the same one who, even after all that, he would give her life for you." Her lips trembled. The makeup ran down her face, erasing any trace of the elegant woman who had entered that church. Now, all that was left was my daughter, my little girl, broken, human, without any masks. The priest came over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "My child, sometimes God doesn't destroy lives but lies," he said tenderly. She looked at him, not knowing what to say. We left the church together, in silence. The guests watched us with a mixture of pity and curiosity. I covered her with my jacket. The wind was blowing hard, lifting petals from the ground as if the sky itself wanted to sweep away the pain. Emily walked slowly, barefoot, because in the midst of everything, she had lost her shoes. We made our way to the small park in front of the church. We sat on the same bench where I had waited that morning. She didn't speak, just stared at the ground, until she finally murmured, I hurt you a lot, didn't I?" "Yes," I answered honestly, "but not more than you hurt yourself by forgetting who you were." She looked up, her eyes swollen. "And do you hate me?" I shook my head. "A mother doesn't hate Emily. She just suffers in silence." There was a long pause. The church bells rang again, but they no longer announced a wedding, but the end of something. She rested her head on my shoulder, like when she was a little girl. "I don't know how I'm going to face people after this," she said through tears. "Start by facing yourself," I replied, without lies, without fear. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky a soft red. I felt the weight of the years on my shoulders, but also something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Perhaps I had destroyed a wedding, yes, but I had also saved a soul, maybe hers, maybe mine. Emily took a deep breath. "Mom," she whispered, "forgive me." I took her hand. "You already are, honey," I said, just by saying it. We stayed like that, in silence, as the evening slowly faded. The white dress, now dirty and torn, moved with the wind like a surrendered flag, and in that moment, I understood that sometimes life can only be rebuilt after it has crumbled. When we got back home, I helped her inside. The old photos still hung in the hallway. She stopped in front of one, of her father, David, smiling. "Do you think he sees me?" she asked. "Yes," I answered, "and I think he's crying, just like us, but not from sadness, from relief." Emily closed her eyes. A tear fell onto the picture frame. "I don't know if I can forgive myself," she murmured. "Forgiveness isn't asked for all at once, honey," I said softly. "It's built, day by day." And then her crying began, the deepest, most liberating cry. I held her, and for the first time in many years, I felt like I had my daughter back. Not the perfect girl, not the proud woman, but the real one. And in that embrace, the past finally began to dissolve. They say the past never dies, it just hides, waiting for the exact moment to breathe down your neck again, and I learned that truth the hard way. Because what happened with my husband, David, was a shadow that stayed with me my entire life. Silent, cruel, and as real as the guilt I carried for having done nothing. I met David when we were both young. He had a smile that could disarm anyone. He worked as a contractor, dreaming of starting his own building company one day. I worked at a diner, with no fortune, but with a heart ready to build him the world if he needed it. We got married with nothing, but we were happy, and for a while, that happiness was enough, until the debts, my father's illness, and life's needs started to erode what we had. David started working longer hours, and I, out of pride, never asked for help. I told myself I could handle everything, but the money wasn't enough. I worked until dawn, and when I got home, he was sometimes already asleep. The silences began, the arguments over small things, the distance, and in the middle of that distance, she appeared. Catherine Peterson, an elegant woman with a pressed suit, polished shoes, and sweet words. She owned the real estate agency where David got most of his contracts. She had a reputation as a lady, a good boss, a successful woman. I met her one afternoon when I stopped by David's worksite. He introduced me with a nervous smile. "My client, Mrs. Peterson," he said, avoiding my eyes. She extended her hand to me and smiled with that rehearsed kindness I would later recognize in her son. "A pleasure, Linda. You have an exceptional husband." I don't know why, but those words sent a chill through me. The following months were confusing. David started coming home later. He said there were blueprints, meetings, special orders, and like a fool, I believed him. Until one night, coming back from the diner, I found an envelope under the door. There was no return address, just a sentence written in blue ink. Open your eyes before it's too late. Inside was a photo. David and Peterson at a downtown cafe, holding hands. My world stopped. The air felt heavy. Rage rose in my throat, but it didn't come out. I just sat in the dining room chair and stared at that photo until dawn. The next morning I didn't confront him, not because I lacked the courage, but because something inside me told me that if I did, there would be no going back. He came in, kissed my forehead, and carried on as if nothing had happened. And I pretended not to know. Weeks later, I noticed he was different, distant, melancholy. One night, while we were eating dinner, he said without looking at me, "Linda, do you think love runs out?" "No," I answered in a dry voice. "Love doesn't run out. It hides." He looked down and said nothing more. Soon after, he got sick. At first, I thought it was exhaustion, but the doctors were clear. A serious heart condition. There was no money for expensive treatments. I went to see Peterson. Yes, I had the courage to do it. I asked her for help. She listened to me with a fake smile and gave me a modest sum, like someone tossing crumbs to a beggar. "For David," she said in that smooth voice that turned my stomach. I didn't hit her. I didn't yell. I just took the money, because he needed it. But I swore it would be the last time that woman bought my dignity. From then on, I dedicated myself completely to taking care of him. The illness consumed him quickly, and one afternoon, while he was in the hospital, a letter arrived for him. The envelope was marked with initials. C. P. The nurse handed it to me, knowing nothing. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. "David, I can't keep seeing you suffer like this. Forgive me for everything. I swear I will take care of our son, and I will never allow him to repeat my mistakes." I froze. Our son. That phrase hit me like a hammer, but I didn't fully understand what it meant until years later, when I heard the name Peterson again. Because that son was Michael, the same one who decades later crossed paths with Emily, the son of the woman who destroyed my marriage, now in love with the daughter of the woman whose husband betrayed her. Life closing its circle with a cruelty that seemed written by fate itself. I never told David anything, not even when I saw him crying at night, knowing that guilt was killing him faster than the disease. One day, before he died, he took my hand and whispered, "Linda, promise me you won't leave her alone." "I promise," I told him, "and promise me," his voice broke, "that you'll never make her carry my mistakes." I nodded, and I kept that promise, until life decided to test my silence. I stored the letter, the photo, and all the memories in a wooden box. That box stayed with me for years, hidden in the closet, like a small tomb where I buried the truth, until the day my daughter introduced me to her fiancé. His name is Michael Peterson. When I heard that last name, I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. From then on, every gesture, every word, every smile from him reminded me of his mother. And I understood that even though years pass, blood doesn't change its color. It was the same pride, the same coldness, the same calculating gaze. The son of the one who stole my husband, about to now steal my daughter. It was too much to remain silent. That's why I wrote the letter. Not to get revenge on David or his mistress, or even on fate, but to break the cycle. Because sometimes true love isn't about protecting, but about stopping. And I needed to stop that story before it repeated itself with a new name and the same tears. Now, as I write this, I understand something I didn't see before. It wasn't David's sin that destroyed us, but my silence. For keeping quiet, for being afraid, for protecting what was already broken, love that doesn't speak the truth rots from the inside. And my entire life was a testament to that slow, silent decay. I look back and wonder if he would have wanted me to reveal everything. Maybe not. But I know that somehow he would understand. Because in the end, the truth was also the only thing that united us. He carried it in his guilt, and I carried it in my pain. And now, seeing my daughter face the weight of that same truth, I know that the past has finally found its rest. The morning after the failed wedding dawned gray, as if the sky itself were ashamed of what had happened. I didn't sleep. I spent the night sitting by the window, watching the streetlights go out one by one, while my mind replayed every word of the letter that had changed our lives. On the table, there were still remnants of the coffee I couldn't finish, and on it, the photo of David and Emily back when they were still happy. Nothing in that picture from the past could have anticipated the disaster to come. There was a knock on the door around noon. I knew it was her before I opened it. Emily. Her face was gaunt, her eyes swollen from crying, her hair hastily tied back. She wore no makeup, none of the shine of the confident woman I had seen leave days before. Now it was my daughter, my little girl, stripped of pride, searching for answers. "I need to talk to you," she said in a hoarse voice. I nodded and let her in. She sat across from me, in the same chair where she had eaten breakfast so many times as a child. A few seconds of silence passed before she spoke. "I saw Michael last night." I didn't respond. "He came to find me at my friend's house," he wanted to explain. She continued. "He said he knew nothing about what you wrote, that his mother died years ago and he never heard that story." Her eyes desperately searched mine, hoping I would contradict her, that I would give her something to hold on to. "And you believed him?" I asked. She hesitated. "I don't know, but something inside me wants to believe him." "Of course," I said with bitterness. "It's what you've always wanted, to believe in anyone but me." She lowered her head, biting her lip. "Don't say that. You have no idea what I'm feeling." "Yes, Emily, I do." I leaned toward her. "I know what it feels like when the person you love betrays you." Her eyes widened in surprise. "You," she murmured. I nodded. "Your father did the same thing to me. That's how I knew. That's why I saw it coming." Emily covered her face with her hands. "I can't believe any of this is real," she whispered. "It is real, honey. It always was. The truth just decided to show itself now." There was another knock at the door. Emily and I looked at each other. "It must be him," she said, standing up. I opened the door. Michael was there, looking haggard, disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. He no longer had his usual elegant air. He held a folder in his hand and a plea on his face. "I need to speak with you, Mrs. Johnson." "We have nothing to talk about," I replied. "Please," Emily intervened. "Just listen to him." I let him in. His presence filled the house with an uncomfortable silence. Michael placed the folder on the table. "I didn't come to argue or deny what happened between my mother and your husband," he said in a grave voice. "I found out last night." My hands tightened on the arm of the chair. "And what do you want me to do with that?" I asked. "Forgive you?" "No, ma'am. Only that you understand that I am not her." His voice trembled. "I didn't choose my last name or my mother's sins." Emily looked at him with tears welling in her eyes. I remained silent for a few seconds. "Your mother destroyed my family," I said finally. "And mine destroyed his, too," Michael responded. His words stunned me. "What did you say?" He opened the folder and took out a yellowed letter. "I found this among his things years ago. I never understood what it meant. Until yesterday." I took the paper with trembling hands. It was David's handwriting. "Catherine, don't come near my house anymore. I don't want to keep living with this guilt. Take care of your son, and may he never know what we did. Promise me you won't let him repeat our story." The letters blurred before my eyes. I felt dizzy, as if the floor were moving. Michael lowered his voice. "He promised me he would never go near your family, that he would move far away, but he died without keeping that promise. And now I understand why fate pushed me towards Emily. It wasn't a coincidence. It was an old debt-seeking redemption." Emily put a hand to her chest. "So, you knew nothing?" "Nothing," he replied. "But if this destroyed you both, I can't continue to be a part of her life." He looked me straight in the eye. "I swear to you, Mrs. Johnson, I loved your daughter without any lies, and if I have to disappear for her to find peace, I will." He put the letter away and turned around. Emily tried to stop him. "Wait!" she cried, but he didn't stop. He left and closed the door with a sharp click that sounded like a final punctuation mark. Silence filled the house again. Emily was crying, sitting in the same chair where her father used to sit. I remained standing, staring at the doorframe where Michael had just been. For a moment, I felt compassion for him. He was innocent of the sin he inherited, yet he had paid for it, just like the rest of us. I went to my daughter and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do you love him?" I asked. She nodded without looking up. "Then don't hate him," I said softly. but don't follow him either. Why? Because some wounds need solitude to heal. And this one, I said, placing a hand on my chest, is one of them. Emily looked at me, her eyes full of tears. Mom, everything hurts. Pain is the truth's way of purifying us, I answered. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time since this all began, I felt that this embrace was not one of guilt, but of comfort. That night, after she fell asleep, I went out to the backyard. The air smelled of damp earth, and the stars, hidden behind the clouds, barely shone. I thought about David, about Catherine Peterson, about the son who inherited her name, and about how time does not forgive but sometimes offers a chance to close cycles with truth. I took the old wooden box from the closet. Inside were the photos, the letters, the memories of a life marked by secrets. I lit a candle and, without much thought, I burned them one by one. The fire illuminated my hands. The smoke rose slowly, like a soul finally finding rest. When the last piece of paper turned to ash, I felt a relief I hadn't known. It wasn't happiness, but it was peace. The story had been told in its entirety. There was nothing left to hide, not for love, not for fear. Tomorrow, I thought, everything will begin again, not with the same people or the same mistakes, but with the certainty that sometimes, the truth, however painful, is the only path to redemption. There are silences that heal more than 1,000 words, and that dawn was one of them. I woke up with the soft light filtering through the curtains. Emily was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in an old blanket. Her face, swollen from crying, reminded me of when she was a little girl, the same expression of exhaustion and tenderness. For a moment, I imagined that time had stopped, that none of what had happened was real, and that I could still make her hot chocolate before she went to school, but reality returned to my mind like an icy sigh. The aroma of coffee filled the house. I placed 2 cups on the table, although I knew she wouldn't drink much. When she woke up, she looked at me in silence. She didn't say, "Good morning." She just sat across from me and held the cup in her hands. "I hardly slept," she whispered. "Me neither," I replied. For a moment, the only sound was the clinking of spoons against porcelain, until, with a trembling voice, she said, "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about everything." I looked down, waiting for what was to come. Her eyes were no longer those of the haughty woman who had despised me days before. There was something new in them: humility, weariness, truth. "All my life I thought you were a weak woman," she continued, "that you hid behind your silence. But now I see that you were quiet to protect me, even when it was destroying you." I managed a small smile. "It wasn't always out of bravery," I said. "Sometimes, being quiet was also a form of fear." She took my hand. Her gesture disarmed me. "Mom, forgive me for the things I said to you, for calling you a failure, for making you feel like you were worthless." "You don't have to ask for my forgiveness," I replied. "Children aren't born knowing how to love their parents. They learn, over time. But I hurt you, and I hurt you too." We sat there quietly, looking at each other. There was something different in the air. The weight of the years was becoming lighter, as if forgiveness were beginning to weave its blanket between us. After breakfast, we went for a walk. The neighborhood seemed different, the streets quiet, the trees swaying in a warm breeze, the neighbors waving without knowing they were watching 2 people rebuild themselves. We walked aimlessly until we reached the small square where I used to take her to play as a child. The benches were worn, and the rusty swing still creaked in the wind. Emily sat on a bench. "You know what I remembered last night?" she said, looking at the sky. "What?" "When Dad died, I was angry with you. I thought you had let him die." "I know," I answered in a low voice. "And I think that anger never left. It grew with me. That's why I always judged you, even if I didn't understand why." Her words pierced me, but they were necessary. "Sometimes pain looks for someone to blame, honey," I told her. "It's the soul's way of not feeling lost. And you? Who did you blame all this time?" I sighed. "Myself." She fell silent, looking at the trees. "Maybe Dad wanted to ask for your forgiveness too," she murmured, "but he didn't have time. Maybe, or maybe his way of doing it was leaving me with you, so that through you, I could understand him." She smiled slightly, sadly. "I guess that's what love is, isn't it? Understanding even what hurts us." I nodded. "Exactly. We spent hours talking, reminiscing, we even laughed. For moments, everything seemed simpler, as if life were giving us a truce. until she looked at me and said something I didn't expect. "I'm going to see him." "Michael?" I asked. She nodded. "Not to get back with him, but to close the circle. I want to look at him and tell him that I forgive him." "That will do you good," I told her. She took a deep breath. "And I also want to start over. I don't know how or where, but I want to." I smiled. "That's called living." On the way back home, I stopped at the door and watched her. For the first time in years, I didn't see her as a confused or ungrateful woman, but as what she always was, my daughter, the flesh and blood of my hopes. And I knew that although life had broken us, love was mending us with new threads, invisible but stronger. That afternoon, while she took a quiet nap, I stood looking at the portrait of David on the mantel. The photo had a small crack in one corner, but his smile remained intact. "We did it, David," I whispered to him, in a clumsy, late way. But we did it. The reflection of the light on the glass seemed like an answer, and for the first time, I felt no resentment towards him. Only gratitude for having left me the chance to correct what we both had damaged. I walked to the window. Outside, the sky was turning orange. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the letter, the ruined wedding, the tears, and yet, in that sunset, I understood that it all had made sense. Pain, when confronted, transforms, and that day I knew that mine was beginning to turn into something resembling peace. As night fell, Emily woke up. "Mom," she called from the doorway, "can I sleep here tonight?" "Of course, honey," I said. She settled into her old room. I turned off the lights and sat beside her, in silence, like when she was little and I would tell her stories to help her fall asleep. She took my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on me." I smiled. "I never did." "I know," she replied, closing her eyes. "I know that now." I watched her sleep. Her breathing was peaceful, as if she were finally resting after a storm, and I too felt that, after so many years, I could close my eyes without fear. Because I had lost so much. A husband, a family, a whole life. But that night, among the shadows of a humble house and the echo of forgiveness, I had recovered the only thing that truly mattered. My daughter. 3 years have passed since that day in the church. 3 years since my voice, turned into a letter, interrupted a marriage, and changed the destiny of everyone present. Sometimes I wake up in the early morning and the silence feels different, as if time itself has learned to walk more calmly. I don't have the strength I used to. My hands tremble. My eyesight tires easily, but my heart beats peacefully, for the first time in many years. Emily lives with me. She transformed the house, painted the walls, hung new curtains, planted flowers in the yard. Sometimes I watch her from my wooden chair, the one I made myself decades ago, as she waters the plants or cooks, and I wonder if David, from wherever he is watching her too. We don't talk much about what happened anymore, but the truth lives between us like a silent, kind guest. We've learned to live with it. On Sundays, Emily takes me to church. We sit in the back row. The priest who read my letter, Father Michael, still officiates there. Every time he sees us, he gives me a slight smile, one of those that says without words, "You did the right thing." And I nod, because I no longer carry guilt, only gratitude. One day, Emily came back from the market with some news. "I'm going to move," she told me while putting away the groceries. "Where to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "To a nearby city. I got a job at a school." I remained silent. She continued. "I want to teach art to children. I want to do something that has meaning." I smiled. "I'm happy for you, honey. You were always good with your hands and with your heart. And will you be okay here alone?" "I've been alone my whole life," I joked. "But this time, it doesn't weigh on me." That night she made dinner. We ate together, reminiscing about simple things. Her first drawing, the dog we had, the bus trips to the hospital when David was still alive. We laughed, and for a moment, everything was light. When we said goodbye, she hugged me tightly, as if she wanted to stay in that moment forever. "Don't cry, honey," I told her. "Goodbyes only hurt when you haven't learned how to love." "And you taught me," she replied. When she left, the silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was a silence full of meaning, like a prayer that had been answered. As the months went by, my strength began to fade. The body, wise in its language, began to let me know that the journey was coming to an end. "I'm not afraid." I have known love, pain, betrayal, and redemption. And if I've learned anything, it's that life isn't measured in years, but in the number of times one dares to speak the truth, even when it hurts. Emily comes every weekend. She brings bread, flowers, and hugs. Sometimes she sits and reads to me out loud. Other times, she just stays silent, holding my hand. And in those moments, I feel my soul is at rest. Everything that was once chaos is now calm. One afternoon, she asked for permission to open the old wooden box, the same one that held the secrets of the past. I nodded, but when she opened it, she only found ashes. "You burned them?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," I replied, "because the past doesn't deserve an altar, my daughter. Only a lesson." She looked at me for a long time, with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Over time, my health worsened. The doctor said my heart was weak, that I should avoid strong emotions. I smiled. After everything I've lived through, what emotion could possibly frighten me now? What doctors don't know is that some hearts don't die from disease, but from having loved too much. And mine, tired, was just waiting to rest in peace, knowing it gave everything. One night, as Emily was reading a passage from the Gospel to me in a low voice, I interrupted her. "You know, honey, sometimes I think God doesn't punish or reward, He only teaches." "And what did He teach you?" she asked, smiling sweetly. "That love without truth is a lie, and truth without love is cruelty." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "Then you learned the hardest part, Mom." "And you did too," I said, closing my eyes. I felt the warmth of her hand on mine. And for the first time in many years, I wasn't afraid, because I understood that my story didn't end with me, but with her, in her strength, in her ability to forgive, in her desire to live without hatred. A few days passed. One spring morning, the sun came in with a warm, golden light. I heard the birds singing and knew it was time. I wrote a few last words on a piece of paper and left it on the table. "Emily, if you're reading this, I am now where life becomes silence. Don't cry. I lived more than I deserved and learned more than I dreamed. Promise me you'll keep loving, even when it hurts, and that when you have a child, you'll tell them about me, not as the woman who ruined a wedding, but as the mother who loved enough to tell the truth." I left the paper under a coffee cup, my usual ritual. I sat in my chair in the living room, looked out the window, and took a deep breath. The air smelled of flowers, of life, and just like that, without pain, without fear, I faded away. Not with sadness, but with gratitude, because in the end, the truth gave me back what time had taken from me, my daughter's love, and the peace of my soul. Days later, Father Michael read my final letter during a small mass. Emily was there, in a simple white dress with a flower on her chest. When he finished, she stood up, walked to the altar, and placed a rose on my photo. And she said, in a firm voice that still resonates in my heart, "My mother taught me that the truth can hurt, but it can also save you." Today, I understand that, and I know she isn't gone. She just went home. The wind blew, lifting petals into the air, and so, amidst the murmur of prayers and the scent of incense, I knew my story had ended where it was meant to, in forgiveness, in love, and in peace. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it also sets you free. Linda departed in peace, leaving her daughter a legacy of love, forgiveness, and dignity, because only those who dare to speak the truth can leave without fear. Tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. Like this video and subscribe to the channel to continue following stories that touch the soul.